welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I'm Carl Christensen. Back with Cameron Christensen and Tim. I think I can speak every language. Cox. Tim, you speak every language. Oh, my word. Okay. This probably should be concerning given that Tim is actually a language teacher. So we must question some amount of the Spanish that he teaches his students.
I've been determined highly qualified by the public school system.
that should be a t-shirt.
I think Tim's teaching style is very much like the latest episode of The Mandalorian with the droid teaching the children.
That would probably be funny if I had seen that.
But it sounds like I could learn some pointers.
Just imagine C-3PO teaching a class.
All right. Okay. So the reference to language here today, we're going to discuss briefly here Suriname, and that's a country rich in languages. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture and languages of Suriname. I lived in Suriname for 2 years doing some church service it's been quite a while ago now. What is it? 12 to 13 years ago. That sounds 14 to 15 years ago. That's been a while, but I still communicate frequently with people in Suriname, and I had quite the experience there. So I wanted to educate the public a little bit about Suriname. It's one of the probably least known countries, at least in the Americas. Generally, if I tell people that I lived in Suriname for a while, they ask me how Africa is doing. And it turns out Africa has no country called Suriname. That's something else. Suriname is on the north coast of South America, north of Brazil, on the Caribbean coast, sandwiched between Guyana and French Guyana. It is a country about the size of the state of Georgia.
French Guinea, right?
No.
What?
No.
I think they have guinea pigs there.
Yes, guinea pigs. Okay, so Guyana on the west side of Suriname, English-speaking country. Suriname, formerly a Dutch colony, has now been independent for some 43 years, I believe, somewhere around that. Is that right? No, 43 years. And then on the east of Suriname is French Guyana, so which is still a part of France. So Suriname's very unique in that it is a Dutch-speaking country in the Americas, in South America, where still the predominant language taught at schools is Dutch. They're obviously also taught English. However, Dutch is not truly the lingua franca of Suriname. Lingua franca meaning language of communication. So the language of communication in Suriname is a language called Suriname or Surinamese, or if you want to, what they call it often there in Suriname, or at least by people visiting Suriname, is Taki. And so it is a Creole language. Let's see. What questions do Tim and Cameron have about Suriname that I could answer?
I have heard, not sure if it's been verified or not, that Hutese is related to what they speak in Suriname.
Oh, this is the language of Jabba the Hutt, right?
Yes.
Right. We also, me and my fellow service missionaries there in Suriname, had the same idea. And we thoroughly debunked it. If George Lucas ever thought he based Hutese or whatever on Suriname, he must have used a word or two. We listened very closely, and there's nothing intelligible. At least not from Suriname. So
Han Miboki is not Suriname.
No. No, it is not. Tragically, I wish it were, because if I could tell people that I spoke Jabba the Hutt's language, I feel like I'd gain a whole new level of respect.
I think you should just say you do. Just go, and then start speaking some Suriname Togo. People won't know the difference.
That's what you do with Wookiee, right, Tim?
Yes. Well, then it's a higher. No, it's a shriller. Never mind. Anyways, it's hard to explain.
Okay.
Do you
Tim,
also
questions?
cook garbage disposal?
Yeah. All right. I'm certainly not going to ask any leading questions because I've never talked with you about Suriname before. But what cultures and ethnicities are a part of Suriname? I'll bet it's just one culture and one ethnicity, because that's how South America is. It's a monolith.
That's right. It's completely made up of. No, it's not. It is a very interesting mix of lots of different cultures, and we'd have to go into a history lesson to talk all about the cultures that and how they got there. But I'll give you a little sampling of what it looks like. So I lived in a few places in Suriname while I was there. The first place I lived in was fully Javanese. So there's a large contingent of Javanese, so Indonesian from Java, Javanese people, and they've imported their culture. A lot of people still speak Javanese. And a lot, almost exclusively Muslim. The area I lived in to begin with was an area where they'd come over the loudspeaker in the village. Five times a day? Forgive me on my ignorance, but I believe it's 5 times a day. It's been a while now. And do the prayers over the loudspeaker. And
also French Guiana, French Guinea as well. That's
okay. Well, not the natives, Tim.
Bitter about being proven wrong.
Okay, so yeah, there's Javanese people, Muslim by and large. So then there's the
quick question. Would the Javanese people, would they consider themselves Indonesians or Javanese?
So I only ever heard them refer to themselves as Javanese.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could of course be wrong, but in my anecdotal experience, all the people that I met all referred to themselves as Javanese. So
not Jabba the Hutt.
No, Tim, no. Okay.
All right. Just
the other group, a couple other groups. So there's a Indian or Hindustani group, so from India. And they also, once again, these people have all largely come over in the last 100 years or 200 years, and so the culture is still pretty strong. So these people are Hindu by and large, these Hindustani or Indian people from India, and so they are Hindustani. They have their culture, the language, and the religion that have all kind of imported with them as well. There are areas that are very strongly just Hindustani, Hindu in Suriname. Lots of Hindu temples, lots of Hindu worship areas in people's yards with the flags and altars and those types of things. So once again, very strong culture there. Then there's the Creole people. These would be the people imported as slaves, black Creoles, and they are large, by and large Christian. They've adopted that, and they're far more along the lines of having what's, I guess, most uniquely a Suriname culture. Not necessarily. There's probably some African influence there. There's still some influence there, but they have probably what's more just a purely Suriname culture that they have. And then the Maroon people, and those are like also black people, but that live more down in the interior of Suriname. They have their own language as well, and that's a good percentage of people. I didn't interact with them as much. They are more isolated. And a large group of Chinese people in Suriname. Chinese people run the economy in Suriname largely, at least the merchant economy. So a lot of almost all stores are owned by Chinese. and run by Chinese people. So, and once again, these people, by and large, all speak their mother tongue. So the lingua franca, once again, the Surinamese or Suriname is the language all these people use to communicate. If they've been educated in Suriname, they speak Dutch. Otherwise, they communicate with Suriname, and then at home often speak their mother tongue, their Japanese, Hindi. Maroon people speak Surinamese, which is more of a Portuguese-influenced Creole language.
Did you say that's the interior language?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So, and then obviously there's going to be some there's a large number of Native Americans there, people native to Suriname, obviously, and I think that's about it. As far as European influence, well, it's quite a bit of European influence, but European people that live there still is very, very, very small contingent. White people are just less than 1% of the population. Now, to be fair, the population of Suriname is very small. It's about 500,000 in the whole country. So, and almost all of them live in Paramaribo. Paramaribo is the capital city. But what is amazing between these Christians and the Hindus and the Islam, the Muslim people, they all get along quite well. Surinamers are very proud of their ability to get along with other cultures. There's something they're very proud about. They will tell you very happily that there is a synagogue next to a mosque in downtown, and they're very happy that everyone gets along very well. And that is what I experienced as well. And so lots of different cultures, and honestly, not a lot of mixing. There is some, and I'm sure that there's some degree of it I didn't get to experience as far as social pressures to not mix. But as far as how they mix in public, they all do quite a pretty good job about being polite and being respectful of other people's cultures, religions, and languages.
Now, is the mixing, so they interact well, but is there is there mixing, kind of social mixing, but each group retains its identity throughout generations, or is it kind of families have their identity, but over time the children, intermarry and new cultures created? Or do
yes,
you see more discrete communities retaining identity?
So I think it's a natural process, and I'm not a scholar in this area, and that's why we can do this podcast. But I believe it's probably a natural process that over time eventually it does. The mixing is when you're in close contact, language change I know is a thing, and I imagine culture change is also a thing. However, having lived there, both in that first area where I lived south of the capital city, where it was just a Muslim community, it stays pretty much a Muslim community, and they're now in the main city in Paramaribo, that's probably where you're going to get most of your mixing. But by and large, the very well defined areas that are specifically for one ethnic group, and it's not policy based. These aren't Jim Crow style laws, as far as I'm aware. These are very much just people wanting cultures of that they're familiar with around them. And so Javanese people usually mix socially with Javanese people, and the same with Hindustani and Creole, black people. So, but like I said, still very friendly. As a white American walking around down there, sometimes I was with people from the Netherlands, sometimes I with other Americans. Occasionally, I was with people native from Suriname. Never felt mostly didn't feel there's a couple stories here that would refute my never assertion there, but I mostly felt very welcome, and people were very open, though they did call me Bush a lot. Bush was our president, George W. Bush. Often you'd ride up, or I rode a bike a lot, or drive up or walk up, and people would just start yelling Bush. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think from our American experience, we're used to the whole melting pot idea that, people assimilate into, this kind of dominant culture, and, eventually your grandparents or great grandparents speak a language that you didn't. I think for a lot of Americans, that's the norm. But I wonder, and, I'll also note that I'm not an expert at this, but I'm just thinking offhand of times where cultures have mixed amicably and maintained distinct identities. I'm thinking of medieval Spain when it was under the rule of Muslims, but Muslim and Christian and Jewish communities retained their kind of religious and cultural identities, even as they exchanged ideas, and languages bled into each other and so forth. So I imagine there's, this is not a an anomalous situation. Maybe it's more common than, the typical Westerner would be inclined to believe.
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, I can't speak broad terms, at least not accurately, but I can say from anecdotal experience in Suriname that while they do a good job mixing, I think some of it might be educational based, honestly. The public education system in Suriname, while it's improving, still has a ways to go. And so the lack of kind of public education allows for families to assert kind of more of a strong hand over education and those types of things. And so they educate their children in their original culture, their language. And then just the play of the looseness of languages down there is, it's kind of expected that you speak three languages, and often at home you speak a different language that's not culturally frowned upon. That's very much expected. And so that this kind of pattern of being able to maintain kind of a particular culture from generation to generation seems, like I said, I'm sure over time it's moving away from that. It's again just from via contact, if nothing else. But yeah, people have been there for 100, 200 years and still strongly identify with a particular culture, language, religion.
You've talked about Creole. Why don't you give an explanation of what you mean by that and what Creole means as far as culture and language?
Yeah. When I think Creole, I think of Southern American blacks with French influence.
Right. Haitian Creole, or Creole from Louisiana, those types of things. So from the language point of view, Creole is a particular language classification. It's not a specific language. It's actually a class of languages. And a Creole language is a language that has become its own independent language via a process of. So first you go from contact languages needing to be able to communicate. So this is take the history of Suriname. You got lots of different cultures. You have the English that originally were in charge of Suriname. Then it became into Dutch rule. The slaves there had African, languages that they spoke, and then they're interacting with lots of different cultures, and so they all need to be able to communicate, and thus is born what's called a pidgin language. And a pidgin language, pidgin language, once again, is a classification of language. It's literally just first generation language, contact language, and where people can learn to communicate using a given set of words. There's not often function words, and it's mostly just nouns, enough to be able to get through a conversation, be able to communicate a particular idea, not necessarily a language that you use for anything else. It's not a language you're going to go home and speak. To
illustrate this, it's a poor illustration, but it's probably for a lot of people it'll be the best approximation of what a pidgin is. If you ever watch any old westerns and you see cowboys and Native Americans communicating using like a handful of words and kind of, heap, for meaning very, heap angry or something like that. It's where words get kind of borrowed and kind of shoehorned into use in a very with a limited vocabulary in order to communicate basic ideas, do business and so forth. So if you've heard that on old spaghetti westerns, that's Hollywood's attempt to approximate a pidgin that spoken between European settlers and natives, in the earlier stages of American history. Then,
yeah, I think that'd probably be a pretty, I mean, as far as what people have experience with, at least in our area in America. But yeah, that's again the general idea of a pidgin. Yeah, it's just practical language essentially. It's not a language that you teach your children. But at some point, when it becomes that, when children start acquiring it as their language, as their lingua franca, as kids start using that language, then you start moving more towards a creole language, and so as soon as it becomes someone's L1 or first language, then and they can communicate whole ideas, whole conversations are carried on in this language, not because they have to, but because they want to. And it's got function, and then it starts taking on a grammar, and then it starts taking on all those other functions of a normal language. That's when we move into a creole status. And so now there, I'm sure, are other steps, and often pidgins are hardly ever written languages. Creoles often, at least in their early development, are still pre-literate languages. So these are, once again, just word of mouth, just children learn them, and then as they grow up, they teach their children, but they aren't necessarily writing in that language, either because they were at the time illiterate, or they have a language that they learn at school that they use. But a Creole language eventually, and as it becomes formalized, once again, will become people study it and there are particular language rules that develop and then formalized in some type of orthography, and written language. Becoming illiterate is a part of it. So Sonoran Tongo does have a written version. There are not a lot of people that use that, though. Once again, interestingly, because Suriname's only official language is Dutch, and while Sonoran Tongo is the lingua franca of the streets, Dutch is taught in school. Therefore, you don't need books in Sonoran Tongo. And so while there are books published in Sonoran Tongo, those are usually religious texts or marketing things, not official government, publications until recently. So within the last 15 to 20 years, Suriname's government's been embracing Sonoran Tongo, largely, I'd say spearheaded by a man named Desi Bouterse, who, if you have any familiarity with American, international government and crime, Desi Bouterse is a international criminal. War crimes committed in the Suriname war and in a civil war from 30, 40 years ago now, convicted of executing, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 15 people, and I believe other war crimes as well, but Suriname refused to arrest him. Their friend Suriname has always kept good relations with Venezuela and Cuba. Probably not your best people to hang out with, but that's kind of their government scene. So Desi Bouterse, if he ever went to the United States or the Netherlands, or at least at one point this was true, he'd be arrested. He was then elected to be president of Suriname about 15 years ago, and he advocated strongly for the use of Sonoran Tongo as the major language, the official language of Suriname. He spoke Dutch fine as well, but he was a very, very antagonistic toward the Dutch presence and Dutch influence in Suriname, and wanted to only speak Sonoran Tongo. He also very much disliked Like I said, anything European, very, very strongly. And I believe he was also pretty anti-American, if I remember correctly. He was president for a long time. I believe he served as president for 8, 10 years, maybe more. I believe he recently was ousted from power. So in my mind, what was that?
Does he have Dutch ancestry? Like,
I don't know, honestly. I know that they said he won an election. He almost won an election while I was there. While I lived there, he lost that one narrowly. He appeals to a particular part of the Surinamese population because he's very virulently anti-Dutch and very pro, Suriname culture, and that plays well. But the fact that he's a war criminal apparently doesn't bother a lot of them. So anyway, he moved toward using more Suriname in government applications, I believe. But anyway, that's a little bit about the Suriname Tonga language. I have a Bible in that language. I saw other publications in those language, mostly marketing. But the orthography, while it has been standardized, the spelling of the words has been standardized. The people that speak it don't know that. So if you ask them to write words in Suriname Tonga, if you ask for one word, from 5 different people, you'll get 5 different spellings. So.
But just to make it clear, the fact that a Creole isn't formalized in written form doesn't make it any less of a language or any less.
No.
You can have a Creole language, and once it's been started to be spoken by people as their native language, it's going to be just as complex and full of a language as any language that's been spoken for millennia. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It has unique characteristics Creole languages do. They syntactically, morphologically very simple. So morphologically meaning that not a lot of conjugation going on. Syntactically, the Suriname Tonga at least is very much English-esque. But yes, there are grammar rules, right? There are things you can and cannot do. The language does have rules. It does, like I said, I have a translation of the Bible. So clearly you can do what you need to do in order to speak, and it is a complete language. Once again, language that many children learn. Is the L1 of many children in Suriname. So as soon as it's somebody's L1, meaning first language, that it then has to serve those cognitive functions of a language. So, but yeah, let's finish off here. I'm going to make this a short one, but just one or two more facts about Suriname, and we'll get out here. So, I said I mentioned the population is pretty small, mostly centered by the coast. Now, if you think Caribbean coast, beautiful Suriname, let's go visit soon. I have bad news for you. Suriname being just north of Brazil, the Amazon runs off into the Caribbean just south of Suriname, just on the other side of French Guiana, and the water around the coast of the Caribbean on Suriname is mud. I went to the coast once, didn't feel any need to go back. There was about a mile of mud before I saw any water. You can't even go out to the water because there is so much mud. Now, I think I went at low tide, maybe at high tide it comes in, but the water is murky and yucky and gross, and the coast is not not what you think when you think Caribbean islands. Well, it's not an island. But.
I just got a text from the Suriname Board of Public Relations. They canceled our sponsorship.
Well, that's not to say there are not other nice things to do in Suriname, just not the coast. Coast isn't worth. Well, there might even be parts of the coast that I did not go to that are worth looking into, but by and large, it's like I said. Unfortunately, the Amazon runoff affects the ability to make it really nice. But there are other areas that are a little more geared toward vacationers. But there's one main airport comes in, is Sonderdij. It's in the south. It's more the north central, I guess, actually, of Suriname. But most of Suriname is Amazon rainforest. So it is gorgeous if you want to go see Amazon rainforest. I had the opportunity a couple times to go down kind of more into central Suriname and get to walk around and see I see all variety of monkeys and frogs and snakes. Oh yes, large anaconda.
Snakes, spiders, all sorts of fun,
Oh,
right?
all kinds of spiders as well. Yeah, ones that would make your skin crawl. So yeah, it's gorgeous though. I mean, truly amazing amount of just Amazon rainforest there, and so there have been some illegal logging, some issues there, but I believe the government has tamped down on at least some of that. The United States, one of the main employers of Suriname, I believe it's Suriname's main export is aluminum. So bauxite is mined there, and Suralco, or Suriname Aluminum Company, is an American-owned company that employs, I believe, has a lot of the really good jobs in Suriname, Suralco jobs, and they do the bauxite mining. So I believe the United States gives money to Suriname a lot in order to do that. But yeah, that's a little bit about Suriname. Let's see. That'll probably be good, unless there are any other questions.
Favorite seafood you had there?
Favorite what?
Seafood.
Favorite seafood. I had some bad experiences with seafood. Remember that a time where I had my favorite seafood. I mean, there's some good fish there.
I imagine
honestly,
there's lots of rivers and stuff, so there's probably variety of river fish that's not common.
Yep. I'm not a big seafood guy. At least I wasn't then. So honestly, I can't comment too much on that. My favorite food, though, was the West Indies has a particular variety of Indian food, Hindustani influenced Western Indian, so Caribbean style food, and they have roti, and roti is an Indian dish. It is a little different in Suriname, though, and a little different in the West Indies. I had it a little bit in Trinidad and Tobago that was similar. A little flatter, a little chewier, but roti and curry chicken, curry vegetables, amazing. So if you've tried it from India, if you've gone to an Indian restaurant around you and had naan or a curry dish there, it's kind of like that, but it's a little different, worth trying. And if you're in America, your best chance is either in Florida or in New York. As far as a West Indian store, Guyanese people that have moved to New York, I have set up a few stores. Also, Washington D.C. I've been there, and they have a store there, or a restaurant there that's really good. So, anyway, good question, Tim.
Your favorite wood food? Sure.
You've never asked me this before, Tim. I'm sure that you had no idea what I'm about to say. Okay, so I knew a Native American man there that was very big into eating grubs. The first area that I lived in Suriname was I had the most experience with I guess more native culture, and there was a lot of bug eating. I won't lie. And so I had the opportunity at one point to eat grubs, freshly picked from a fallen tree, and they were alive, and they were, I don't know, let's say 1 inch, inch and a half long, maybe 2 of the big ones, currently crawling around, little pinchers on their head. So the idea when you eat those is you pick them up, you crush the head, because you don't want the pincher active in your mouth, right? So you crush the head and you pop it in your mouth. And the best explanation I can give for a grub, those grubs that I had, is a maple flavored gusher. You take a nice bite into it, explodes in your mouth. Tastes like maple. I mean, not maple. It's obviously not maple tree, but it tastes like tree. If you can get past, so the first experience, once again, if you have not eaten bugs before and a bug explodes in your mouth, if you can get past the mental hurdle, it actually doesn't taste bad. However, the chewiness of the bug after that, and the fact that it's still squirming slightly, is slightly unappetizing. But once you get it down, you're good to go. I do not, however, recommend the fried version. I had them cooked as well. Same grubs, same man that I knew later served them to us cooked. I don't recommend. It lost a lot of the gusher, flavor, the excitement of having them explode in your mouth. They were just kind of dry and tough. So if you're going to eat your bugs, eat them fresh.
I just threw up in my mouth.
It's worth trying. If you go to Suriname, try some grubs. It's a good time. There are other variety of bugs that they eat there as well. I didn't actually get to sample those myself.
It's worth trying. Twitter and Facebook just flagged that as under dispute.
Yes. Anyway, Suriname, wonderful place, wonderful people. If you have an interest in seeing a very unique culture in South America, getting to see a very linguistically diverse place, and have some money to burn, because getting there is a little bit expensive from the United States, though there are direct flights from the Netherlands. So if you want to fly from the Netherlands to Suriname, you can do so direct, because once again, it used to be a colony, so they still fly direct. But it is worth giving it a run. It's interesting. And that will take us to the end. So join us next time. We'll talk a little bit about traditions. We've got Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas coming up, lots of different religious holidays, and we'll talk a little bit about traditions, and join us then.